Tonight, in a decision that will be studied for generations, the United States Supreme Court has blocked former President Donald Trump's ambitious $1 trillion tariff plan, a move that many believed would have fundamentally altered the global economic landscape. The court's ruling has sent shockwaves across the globe, with financial markets, governments, and everyday citizens all grappling with the immediate and long-term implications of this historic verdict. This landmark decision not only redefines the constitutional limits of presidential authority, but also reshapes the future of international trade, setting a precedent that will influence how America engages with the world for decades to come. From bustling American factories and small-town businesses to the massive container ports of Asia and the financial centers of Europe, the world is reacting in real time to a verdict that will echo through boardrooms, government halls, and households alike. At the heart of this case lies a fundamental question. How much power should one individual, even the president, wield over the nation's vast and complex economy? The Supreme Court's answer will shape not only this administration, but all those that follow. Supporters of the tariff plan argued it was a necessary shield for American jobs and industries, a bold step to protect workers from unfair foreign competition and to revive domestic manufacturing. But opponents warned of dire consequences: soaring prices for everyday goods, empty shelves, and the looming threat of a global recession that could devastate families and businesses both at home and abroad. The Supreme Court's intervention brings this high-stakes conflict to a dramatic and definitive conclusion, drawing a firm line on the extent of presidential power and signaling to future leaders that such sweeping economic decisions require broader consensus. In the immediate aftermath, global markets are rallying, investors are breathing a sigh of relief, and world leaders are reassessing their strategies as the threat of a full-scale trade war appears to recede, at least for now. For American businesses, especially small and medium-sized enterprises, there's a palpable sense of relief as uncertainty lifts and the path forward becomes clearer. Yet for many workers who had pinned their hopes on new protections and a manufacturing revival, there is disappointment and renewed anxiety about the future of their jobs and communities. Tonight, we break down what this historic ruling means for you, for the country, and for the interconnected world we all share, exploring the legal, economic, and personal impacts of a decision that will shape our collective future. To truly grasp the significance of today's Supreme Court decision, we need to look back and understand how we arrived at this pivotal moment in American trade policy. The roots of this case stretch deep into the history of U.S. trade, where debates over tariffs and protectionism have shaped the nation's economic landscape for centuries. When Donald Trump took office, he made trade reform a central promise, arguing that previous deals had disadvantaged American workers and industries. His tariff plan became the centerpiece of his America First agenda, designed to counter what he described as unfair trade practices, particularly from China and other major trading partners. Trump's solution was bold and controversial, imposing sweeping tariffs on a vast array of imported goods. The goal was to encourage Americans to buy domestic products, protect U.S. jobs, and force trading partners back to the negotiating table for better deals. The trillion-dollar tariff package affected everything from electronics and automobiles to food and clothing. The administration justified these measures not only as economic policy, but also as essential for national security, arguing that America's independence and prosperity were at stake. However, critics quickly sounded the alarm. They warned that these tariffs would inevitably raise prices for everyday Americans, fuel inflation, and provoke retaliatory tariffs from other countries. Farmers, manufacturers, and small businesses feared they would be caught in the crossfire, facing shrinking markets and higher costs. The sweeping scope of Trump's plan challenged decades of bipartisan support for free trade, igniting fierce legal and political opposition. Lawsuits piled up, and protests erupted across the country as people debated the future of American commerce. Businesses and state governments argued that the Constitution gives Congress, not the President, the exclusive power to regulate commerce and impose taxes. They claimed Trump had overstepped his authority, setting a dangerous precedent for executive power. This fundamental dispute over the limits of presidential authority and the separation of powers set the stage for a dramatic legal showdown that would test the very foundations of American government. After years of legal battles and national debate, the conflict finally culminated in the Supreme Court's historic ruling, a decision that will shape the future of U.S. trade policy and presidential power for generations to come. The legal case hinged on the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA. The Trump administration claimed trade deficits were a national emergency, justifying broad presidential action under IEEPA. Historically, IEEPA was used for targeted sanctions, not sweeping economic policy. Opponents argued this was executive overreach, violating the Constitution's separation of powers. The case became a test of the non-delegation doctrine. Congress cannot hand its legislative powers to the president. The Supreme Court was forced to decide the true limits of presidential power in economic crises. At the Supreme Court, arguments centered on executive power versus constitutional order. Trump's lawyers insisted the president needs flexibility to protect national security, even in economic matters. Opponents argued only Congress can impose such sweeping tariffs, warning of real-world harm to families and businesses. The justices pressed both sides. If trade deficits are emergencies, what isn't? Where are the limits? They questioned whether Congress had truly delegated such vast power through IEEPA, the tension presidential agility in crisis versus the constitutional mandate for legislative control. The fate of the trillion-dollar tariff plan and presidential authority hung in the balance. The case's journey was marked by conflicting lower court rulings. Most judges sided with challengers, halting the tariffs and ruling that IEEPA wasn't meant for broad economic policy. But strong dissents argued for deference to presidential judgment, citing past Supreme Court precedent. This split created legal chaos, making Supreme Court intervention inevitable. The stakes were too high for such a massive policy to vary by region. The Supreme Court took the case, tasked with resolving a fundamental dispute over the balance of power. The fractured legal landscape set the stage for a definitive ruling. On October 31, 2025, the Supreme Court blocked Trump's trillion-dollar tariff plan in a 6-3 decision. The majority ruled that IEEPA does not grant the president power to impose sweeping tariffs for general economic protectionism. Persistent trade deficits, they said, aren't the kind of emergency IEEPA was designed to address. The court reaffirmed that Congress alone has the power to levy taxes and duties. Dissenting justices warned the decision weakens the presidency in times of economic threat. The ruling rests on the major questions doctrine. Congress must speak clearly to delegate such vast authority. This verdict sets a new precedent for the limits of presidential power. The decision brings immediate relief to consumers and businesses, lifting the threat of sudden price hikes and supply chain chaos. Politically, it reasserts Congress's authority over major economic policy, signaling that executive orders can't bypass the legislative branch. Globally, the ruling eases fears of a trade war and signals a return to more predictable international trade rules. Yet, the core issues, unfair competition and job losses, remain unresolved. For workers who supported tariffs, the ruling is a setback. For others, it's a reprieve. The focus now shifts to Congress and the administration to find new ways to support American industries. The debate over trade and economic fairness is far from over. Legal scholars across the country are calling this one of the most significant separation of powers cases to come before the Supreme Court in decades. The decision, they say, marks a turning point in how the branches of government interact, especially when it comes to the delicate balance between the executive and legislative branches. Many experts are poring over the details, analyzing the far-reaching implications for future administrations and the legal precedents it sets. Many praise the decision for its clear stance on curbing executive overreach, arguing that it reaffirms Congress's constitutional role in shaping economic policy. By drawing a firm line, the ruling is seen as a victory for those who believe in checks and balances, ensuring that no single branch can act unilaterally on matters as important as trade and tariffs. Some legal analysts suggest this could lead to a new era of legislative engagement in economic affairs. Economists, meanwhile, are weighing in with their own perspectives. They say the ruling helps avert what could have been a self-inflicted economic wound, potentially sparing the country from sudden market disruptions. However, they caution that while the decision addresses immediate concerns, it does not resolve the deeper, ongoing challenges facing U.S. trade policy. The underlying issues of global competition and supply chain vulnerabilities remain. Some experts argue that by requiring more deliberation, the decision could make the U.S. less nimble in responding to fast-moving economic crises. This has sparked a lively debate among policymakers and scholars about the trade-off between government efficiency and the need for thorough democratic processes. The question of how best to balance swift action with careful oversight is now front and center in policy discussions. Despite these debates, most agree that the ruling brings much-needed clarity to the rules governing trade policy. By placing responsibility squarely on Congress, the Supreme Court has made it clear that lawmakers must now take the lead in crafting and approving major economic measures. This shift could reshape how future trade disputes and tariff decisions are handled in Washington. As one historian put it, the court didn't ban tariffs. It simply said the president can't impose them this way. This distinction is crucial, as it preserves the government's ability to use tariffs as a tool, but insists on a more transparent and accountable process. Historians note that this echoes earlier moments in American history when the balance of power was recalibrated. With this landmark decision, the ball is now firmly in Congress's court. Lawmakers face the challenge of stepping up to their constitutional responsibilities, debating and deciding on the nation's trade policies in a way that reflects both urgency and careful consideration. The question now is clear: will Congress rise to the occasion and act decisively, or will uncertainty continue to cloud America's economic future? All eyes are on Capitol Hill as the nation waits for the next move. The Supreme Court's decision marks a turning point, halting a disruptive policy and redrawing the boundaries of presidential power. The immediate effect is stabilization for consumers, businesses, and global markets. The ruling signals a renewed commitment to checks and balances in U.S. economic policy. But the core issues, global competition, job losses, and trade fairness, remain. Now, Congress and the administration must work together to chart a new path. The debate over America's economic future returns to the political arena. The Supreme Court has set the stage. What happens next is up to the nation's leaders and its people.